Hello, it's Chris here, and hopefully you will soon be hearing me live. This is the first time I've used this method, so it would be really helpful if you could let me know if you have any problems with hearing or seeing this. If you go below the video, you should be able to see the comments boxes, and I'll try to keep an eye on that in case anybody's having any problems. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping before we get going and to give latecomers time to come on board. First of all, as I said, this is a new method that I'm using for webinars. The big advantage is it doesn't cost anything, but I'm sure there could be some disadvantages as well. So it would be really helpful to hear from you if you do have any comments. And if anybody would like to know more about the method I'm using, I can just contact me by email or on the comments afterwards, and I'll be happy to explain it to you. The comments are below, and you can type in there any stage during the webinar, and I'll try to keep an eye on it and respond to your comments as they appear. If you are there at the moment and can hear me, could you type something like hello in the comment box, or hi, or season's greetings, or whatever. That's partly to find out whether it's actually working, and obviously it also reassures me that I've got somebody listening to me. And okay, and part of this is oh yeah, and another reason is that I would like to know how long it takes when I ask for a comment for it to come through. Okay, so we'll press on, and hopefully I can see there are two viewers, and you're both being very coy and not saying hello. Please, if you could just leave me a comment so that I know that you can hear me, that would really help. Okay. Right. I'll just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put comments in. I've just asked if you can hear me, because I think if I press on and you can't see me, it could all end up being a bit pointless. Okay. Right, as far as I can see, everything's working, and so I will press on. And welcome to the two of you, and hopefully you'll speak to me at some point. Okay. I want to take you back to 1945, and my great uncle Herbert contemplated a massive hole. The hole was at the top of Crooksmoor Road, which, if you know it, runs from Crooks Road at the top of the hill down to Netherthorpe. And towards the top of the hill, there was a hole. And that hole belonged to my great uncle Herbert. I don't know how he got it. Knowing him, it probably fell off the back of a lorry. But now that he had it, the question is what to do with it. What can you do with a hole in the ground? So Herbert gave it some thought, and he had an idea. He wasn't sure if it would work, but it was worth a go. So he paid for an advert in the Sheffield Star. And that advert read, landfill, £1 a lorry load, and then the address. And the following morning, Herbert got up and he thought, oh, I better go down to the hole and check, just in case there's a lorry or two waiting there. So off he went, and when he got there was a queue of lorries stretching all the way down Crooksmoor Road, which, if you know it, is a long road. And that is how Herbert got the capital to found his business, by filling in that hole. It was obviously 1945, just after the Blitz. There must have been a lot of rubble to clear from the city centre, and so Herbert benefited from all of that. And then when the hole was full, he levelled it off, and he built some domestic garages on the top that he rented out. It's probably the dullest place in Sheffield, unless you know the story, which makes it just a little bit more interesting. With that capital, Herbert, who was a plumber, bought a shop on Barber Road, which is just off Crooksmoor Road, and set up a bathroom fittings business. And of course, once again, it hit just the right moment. When the house I was born into on Roach Road in Sheffield had an outside lavatory. I can still remember a lot of the details of making and applying whitewash, a skill that has been lost to more recent generations. But we did have an indoor bath. But that bath was in my bedroom, and it had a sort of cover on it. So when anybody wanted a bath, I had to get out of my bedroom, and they would have a bath, take the cover off, and have a bath. And most of the terrace houses in Sheffield were like that at the time. So Herbert got in at the right time as people began to improve their houses and put in fitted bathrooms. And he was one of these businessmen who could find loads of stuff and buy it cheap and sell it off a little bit more expensively, but cheaper than anywhere else. And apparently he even got into trouble with John Lewis. At the time, their department store was called Co Brothers, but they still had the slogan they have today, never knowingly undersold. And it was Herbert who was always underselling them and annoying them for that reason. But he did very well. When I moved back to Sheffield in the late 80s and the early 90s, that shop was still there on Barber Road. And then it moved down to Penistone Road, and Fairey's bathroom fittings is still there. And as far as I know, the family still benefits from it. A successful local businessman. Uncle Herbert had a kid brother called Eric, and sadly Eric died at the age of 26. But before he died, he took his nephew under his wing. His nephew's name was Derek, and he was my father. And he left school very early. I can't remember the exact age, of 12 or 14, something like that. And Eric introduced him to the joys of roof work, working on roofs of factories. And my father fell in love with the problem solving that goes with it. For example, if you want to put up a chimney and comfort it in a building, and you've just got ropes and men, how do you do it? Don't ask me, I haven't a clue. But those were the sorts of problems that he enjoyed solving. And so in time, he got his only qualification, which was in technical drawing. And in 1956, he set up in business. I think Herbert was his mentor, or tormentor. He set up in business as a sheet metal worker, because that was his passion. And the thing that really fascinated him was how to solve problems in steel. So he would go along to a factory and they'd say, we need this machine guard here, and it's a very awkward and nothing that we can find will fit it. But my father's job was to work out exactly what they needed and then make it and fit it. And that was his real driving passion, the solving of those sorts of problems. So in a sense, he was also a coach as well as a consultant. Now, we have two men here, and I think in some ways they illustrate two different approaches to business. On the one hand, we have Herbert, who was very much an entrepreneur. His approach was, how can I make money? How can I maximize my profits? that seems to have been his main motivation. Whereas my father, although he did want to make money, and in fact ran that business for 30 years until 1986, but he was much more motivated by his passion for sheet metal work and design and planning and problem solving. Now, in truth, these are not two extremes. They're really more like a spectrum, because people who set out to make money often discover as they go on that they make more money when they actually build relationships with their customers and listen to them and help solve their problems. And people who set out with a passion that they want to sell to the public discover before too long that they actually need to make money to keep going. So we have these two extremes. And this is something that I want to return to later, because although they have extremes, there's a whole range in between. But before I do that, I just want to go back to my family history, because I think it illustrates something else, and that is that people generally are much closer to the business world than they might think. That all of us are connected in many ways to the business world. And what I'd like you to do, and I'm going to pause for half a minute or so to give you time to do this, is just to think about your own family. Think about the people you know in your family, excluding yourself, who are or have been in business. You can go as far back in time as you like. I went back to 1945. I could actually have gone back further, because I know of some even earlier people in my father's family who were in business. Or failing that, you could think of more distant relatives, like second cousins 3 times removed or whatever. There must be somebody. So I'll give you half a minute, and I'll check the comments while you're doing that, and then we'll see whether any of you have got any ideas. Okay. Okay, I notice I've got 3 viewers now, and it doesn't feel like anybody's left, so presumably you can't hear me, although nobody's commenting so far. Let's press on, and do please, if you have any questions, do put them in the comments, because at the end I will attempt to answer any questions that you put in there, so you can see if you can phase me by asking me something I can't answer. What I want to do now is to pick up that, that issue of the way in which business penetrates our society by talking about public space. I often use the word agora instead of public space, and that's an eccentricity of mine. It's the Greek word for marketplace. And whilst marketplace is an accurate translation for agora, I think public space, perhaps for modern people, is a better way of describing it. Because public space are the places where we encounter one another and build relationships. And it is absolutely essential that businesses are a part of it. You cannot have a public space without some sort of business involvement. But although business is necessary, it is not sufficient to make a public space. But a lot more goes into public space than just the businesses. So you may find libraries, for example, or churches or other places of worship, community centres, parks, even street furniture and trees and things like that are all a part of the public space. And it is where we do business. Not necessarily always financial business, but it is where we do business. And business, I think, is essential to it because business structures public space. And it's really important that businesses are involved because it is very often that that local businesses actually know the place where they're based. They know some of the problems in the area and they can help solve problems in the area. And often businesses do get together and do that. And if businesses are aware of it, they can take the initiative and actively build the public space. And this can be beneficial to their business as well as being beneficial to the wider community. Now, if you contrast that sort of local business with corporations, we have a very different story. Now, corporations do make a contribution to the local economy, for example, by employing staff, which gets some money circulating in the area. But the defining characteristic of corporations is that net they take money out of the community. As a result of them being present, they are there is less money circulating in the community, and that impoverishes the other businesses in the area simply because they're taking money out and paying it to shareholders or putting it in offshore bank accounts or whatever it is that they do with it. And also, corporations do not really care for the neighbourhoods that they operate in. I know the local authority very often goes to great lengths to attract big business into the area. The problem with that, despite some of the immediate benefits, is that if they get a better offer, they can up sticks and go there. So it does depend on the type of business. The benefit that businesses offer to public space does depend on the type of business. Now, I want to say something about coaching, because just as business structures the public spaces, it is coaching that structures business. And I want to say three things about that. First of all, coaching is about problem solving. And the big advantage that coaching brings to someone who's trying to solve a problem is it brings in an additional brain. So the clever people actually have coaches. We tend to think that coaching is for people who are still learning the job. But actually, people who are at the top of the game very often have a coach or a consultant who can bring an additional brain to a problem. Because even though you, in your business, may know more than the coach about your particular business, the coach can still ask those essential challenging questions that will help you to think about the problem in a different way. Second thing I want to say about coaching is that to some degree it is relevant to all businesses. To some degree, all businesses have an element of coaching. I've already mentioned my father as being a coach or a consultant who solved problems with sheet metal, and that is something that he was able to do even without using sheet metal. One story he used to tell, I think it was Hawley's who sold tools, and they called him in and they said, look, we've got this giant boiler and we need to get it in the cellar. What we want you to do is to put a pulley at the top of the cellar head and then lower it down on ropes. How much would it cost? So my father said, well, it'll be about £360 for me to do that for you, which was a lot of money in those days. He said, look, I'm willing to do it for £360, but can I make a suggestion that might cost you less? I said, yeah, go on. He said, get half a dozen of your men together and tell them there'd be an extra 10 quid in the wage packet if that boiler's in the cellar by morning. Next morning, my dad gets a phone call, and they're saying, "You're a miracle worker. How did you do it?" The father said, "How did I do what?" They said, "The boiler's in the cellar. We did what you asked. We didn't think it would be, but it is." And the father simply knew, you give 6 men the task and the incentive, they'll find a way of doing it. And that is something that businesses do all the time. So when we talk about coaching and consultancy, we must be careful not just to think about those who have deliberately chosen to be coaches and consultants. There are many others who find they're doing it anyway because of what they sell. And the third point I want to say about coaching, and this brings it back in touch with the public spaces, is that coaches don't only work with their clients, they also work with their clients' clients or their customers' customers. In other words, the work that they do with people benefits the people those people work with. So the reach of coaches and consultants is far more than they might think it is. So, now let's see. Sorry, I lost something. Okay, so let me say a bit more about public spaces. And the public space is a place that you deliberately visit, and the purpose of visiting is to do business transactions and build relationships. And that sort of public space has been with us for centuries and centuries. It's the essential way in which people operate in most cultures. But it's been attenuated or eroded by the powerful corporations that are taking finance out of our communities. And a very good I'm not sure which way round this. I think you should get this the right way around. But just in case you don't, how to save our town centres, a radical agenda for the future of our high street. It's by Julian Dodson, who's a lecturer at Sheffield Hallam University, and one day I do plan to contact him. And I recommend that book because I mean, my only criticism of it is that he only talks about town centres and he doesn't really touch on neighbourhood centres. But I think pretty much the same applies to both. In the first half of the book, he explains what's gone wrong and the way in which we're losing our public spaces because of, he names 3 main factors: supermarkets, out-of-town shopping centres such as Meadowhall in Sheffield, and internet business are all eroding those spaces. And the problem is that local authorities want to draw back into their town centres the big corporations. So they keep the rates high, which means that the local businesses can't really get a foothold in those centres. The second half of the book looks at a variety of aspects of what public space can be, because it's not just a place for trade, it's a place where people live, for example. It's a place for open spaces, parks, and of course car parks, which are a major headache. What else? It's places for administration, for libraries, and so on. So Julian Dodson is looking to the future, because it's interesting, I think, to ask the question, what happened in what has happened over the last 50 or so years that has so eroded these public spaces? If you go back to the first half of the 20th century or earlier, you will encounter names that we still see around Sheffield today. And if you live in another city, you'll see similar names. And let me give you the Sheffield names: Graves, Firth, Ward, Hadfield, Jessup, Ellison, and there are probably, well, there are definitely many more. But these were all business people who saw contribution to the civic, the public space as really important. John George Graves is perhaps one of the most famous in Sheffield. He was a watchmaker who set up in business, and I think it was in 1886. He set up as a mail order company, and he started selling watches, and then expanded into selling other things. He invented the mail order company, he invented the monthly payment plan, and he made his fortune. He had at the peak of his career 3,000 employees, and by all accounts, treated them very well. Uh, I think it was in the early decades of the 20th century, he purchased Graves Park, hence the name, and developed it as a public open space. So it wasn't about him leaving legacies at the end of his life. He was very much involved in building things. And then in 1934, he paid for the building of the Graves Building in the city centre that houses the Central Library, various other libraries, the Graves Art Gallery, to which he contributed a lot of the paintings, and the Library Theatre. Graves contributed, they believe, something like £1 million to the city, and there's still a Graves Trust today. And he is one example. He's talked of as if he is a local benefactor, as indeed he was. But I think I would want to say that he was making an investment in his city, the city that he actually adopted. He was born in Lincolnshire. But why did people like Graves or Firth, Ward, Hadfield, Jessup and so on, why did their approach disappear? I think in part, Graves found £30,000 to build the Graves building. Why are businesses unable to do that now? Well, I think it's because they are corporations that are in effect asset stripping our cities, and they're taking money out of the cities and putting it into offshore accounts or whatever they do with it. And so they simply do not have the surplus cash to invest locally. And this is a decision that we all need to make about the type of cities that we want to live in. And I think we need to start thinking in terms of heart-centered business. I'm nearly finished now, so hopefully I'll just say a few words about this and then wind up. Heart-centered business. I think the problem goes back to a philosopher called John Stuart Mill. It wasn't his fault. What he did was he did a thought experiment. And in this thought experiment, he posited Homo economicus, the economical man. And the point about Homo economicus was he accumulated wealth and power without responsibility. And I think Mill was asking, what would the world be like if everybody behaved in that way? Well, we know the answer to that now, don't we? It has become, Homo economicus has become a description of who we are, a world of individuals and a world bereft of community. George Monbiot has recently published a book about loneliness. And in that book, he mentions Homo economicus. And he says that this ideology of everybody being out for their own power and wealth has created isolated individuals. And he said loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness kills. And I think loneliness, and I think isolation has another effect as well. It builds a society of popularism, where frustration builds and builds and then it boils over. And this will account for phenomena such as social media trolls and some of the popularist movements we've seen, particularly this year, with the likes of Aaron Banks who funded the Brexit campaign, um, Donald Trump in America, and even Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party, these movements of frustration that are actually not really engaging with the problems that we face. So what is the alternative to isolation? And the answer, we can blithely say, is community. But it's much more about that. And certainly one of the things I'll be talking about next time is the way in which we've impoverished community by ring fencing it and keeping business out of it. Because business is essentially about relationships, about working together to solve common problems, and about mutual education. And so all of these things somehow need to be brought together and brought together so that we can begin to reconstruct those public spaces that we so desperately need. So I've got another question for you, and you may have some questions for me. So while I'm going to tell you what the question is, then I'll pause for half a minute while I have a look to see if you've written any questions for me, and that'll give you time to respond to my question, and then I'll answer any questions that you've posted, and then I've just got one or two other things to say which may be of interest to you. So my question is this. We often talk about the benefits of to the community when business gets involved in the community. And I think some of those are fairly obvious, quite easy to list. My question is, what do you think are the benefits to business of being involved in the community? So I'm flipping the question around. So what do you think are the benefits to business of being involved in the community? I'll be really interested to see your answers. And I'm going to go over and have a look, see if you've got any questions, and I'll pause for half a minute while I'm doing that. Okay, I've not received any comments now. There are two possible explanations I can think of. One is that you're not commenting. The other possibility is that there is a fault somewhere, and I need to go into the back and try and correct it. But if you have attempted to post something and it's not gone through, if you could send me an email and tell me that, that would be really helpful. And also, indeed, tell me what your question is. I've got a feeling I must have missed something in the plumbing at the back of the website. Something's clearly not connecting up. So, right. A few final comments, and then we'll be done. This is the first of 3 webinars, and I'm going to tell you when the other 2 are. They're all on Wednesday evenings at the same time. The first one is on the 4th of January, and that one will be about the third sector. So I'm going to be looking at the public space again, but from a third sector perspective, and at some of the activities that have been developed in the third sector, such as social enterprise. And then the third one is on the 18th of January, and that will be about how we get currency circulating in the local economy. So what will happen, I'll explain all of this in an email that I'm going to write to you all tonight. But basically, if you've signed up for this one, I will make sure you get the details of the other two. So you won't need to sign up again. And please recommend these webinars to your friends and anyone who may be interested. I shall do my best to get the comments working if they're not working already. And thank you for listening. I see I've still got 3 viewers. I suppose that does mean that you are listening, and that's really great. I'm really pleased about that. And it'd be wonderful if we could get the numbers up next time. And hopefully, if there are any problems, I can get it working properly in due course. So that's the end of the first webinar. I'm going to sign off now. And as I say, if you have been trying to comment and not getting through to me, please send me an email, and I'll then know that there is a problem. Okay, thank you.